Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Kyiv with the headlines. Russia abandons Ukrainian city of Kherson in major retreat. Well, at UN plenary meeting, Russian representative to the United Nations, Alexander Shevchenko, says there cannot be a winner in a nuclear war. And British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says Britain is stepping up its support for Ukrainian soldiers through the winter. Well, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu ordered his troops to withdraw from the occupied Ukrainian city of Kherson and take up defensive lines on the opposite bank of the river Dnipro. This announcement marked one of Russia's most significant retreats and a potential turning point in what Moscow calls its special military operation, now nearing the end of its 9th month.
Having comprehensively assessed the situation, I propose that we take up defensive positions along the left bank of Dnipro River. I understand that this is a very difficult decision. At the same time, we will save, most importantly, the lives of our troops and overall combat effectiveness of the troops. In addition, it will free up some forces and means that will be used for active operations, including offensive ones, on other fronts in the zone of the operation. In the current condition, the city of Kherson and the surrounding settlements cannot be fully supplied and cannot operate. People's lives are constantly endangered by shelling. The enemy is firing indiscriminately into the city, possibly using prohibited methods of warfare.
Proceed with the withdrawal. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the eastern Donetsk region was seeing the heaviest fighting and that in the south, Ukrainian forces were gradually moving forward. In his nightly video address, Zelensky did not give details of advances in the south of the country, saying that it will not defend the enemy with all the details of our operations. He also said any advances were hard fought and stressed the need for caution rather than celebration. Well, United States President Joe Biden says Russia's order to evacuate troops from the west bank of the Dnipro River near the Ukrainian city of Kherson shows Moscow was having real problems with its military. Biden told reporters that it was interesting that Russia had waited until after the U.S. congressional election to announce the withdrawal. He says it's evidence of the fact that they have some real problems with the Russian military. He adds that the withdrawal will allow both sides to recalibrate their positions over the winter, but it remains to be seen whether Ukraine was prepared to compromise with Russia.
Well, they made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well. In the area of foreign policy, I hope we'll continue this bipartisan approach of confronting Russia's aggression in Ukraine. When I return from the G20 meetings in Indonesia with other world leaders, I'm going to invite the leaders of both political parties, as I've done in the past in my foreign trips, to the White House to discuss how we can work together for the remainder of this year and into the next Congress. We've not given Ukraine a blank check. There's a lot of things that Ukraine wants we didn't do. For example, I was asked very much whether we'd provide American aircraft to guarantee the skies over Ukraine. I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to get into a third world war, taking on the Russian aircraft and directly engage. But would we provide them with all the rational ability to defend themselves? Yes. And there's so much at stake. So I would be surprised if Leader McCarthy even has a majority of his Republican colleagues who say they're not going to fund the legitimate defensive needs of Ukraine.
Now, one of Russia's most prominent officials in Ukraine has been killed in a car crash. A blow to Moscow in the southern Kherson region amid growing talks. It is poised to withdraw its forces from the city. The death of Kirill Stremisov, the deputy head of the Russian-installed local administration, was confirmed by his boss, Vladimir Saldo, who is Russia-backed acting governor of Kherson. Shchemasov went from being an obscure blogger and local politician before February the 24th to becoming the #2 figure in what Ukraine says is the illegal occupation of Kherson, which it plans to overturn by force. He was a highly visible face on social media, pumping out pro-Moscow statements. In the most recent hours before his death, he denounced what he called Ukrainian Nazis and said the Russian military was in full control of the situation in the south. Ukraine viewed him as a collaborator and a traitor. Russia says there cannot be a winner in a nuclear war and condemned UN member states for falsely accusing Russia of threatening to use nuclear weapons in a United Nations plenary meeting on an IAEA report yesterday. Ukraine's representative, Anatoly Zelenko, says Russia's military action at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant contradicted Russia's own professed standards and consequent severe loss among the civilian population. Head of the European Union's delegation, Olaf Skog, said Russia's actions continue to pose serious and direct threats to Ukrainian nuclear facilities.
The EU condemns in the strongest possible terms the Russian Federation's war of aggression against Ukraine, which is and remains a gross violation of international law, including the UN Charter, and severely undermines European and global security and stability. Russia's actions continue to pose serious and direct threats to Ukrainian nuclear facilities and impede the IAEA from fully and safely conducting safeguards verification activities in Ukraine in a timely manner. We are deeply concerned that each of the 7 indispensable pillars for nuclear safety and security outlined by the IAEA Director General has been compromised as a consequence of the Russian Federation's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on 24th of February. We call on Russia to immediately implement the IAEA Board of Governors resolutions in order for the competent Ukrainian authorities to regain full control over all nuclear facilities within Ukraine's internationally recognized borders, including the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and to ensure their safe and secure operation, and in order for the agency to fully and safely conduct its safeguards verification activities.
Mr. President, every such report is a visible reminder for Russia, an aggressor state, that the IAEA, just as all other multilateral organizations, especially international standard-setting bodies, operate within the rules that are vital to security, interests, values, and prosperity of their respective member states. As Russia, with complicity of Belarus, has been carrying out a brutal military assault on Ukraine, it will continuously face widespread condemnation and isolation in international bodies. The IAEA will not be an exception, as Russian aggression against Ukraine impacts the agency's work too. Russia's actions against and at the Zaporizhzhia NPP contradict Russia's own formally professed standards, which documentally bar any actions, including military, that may result in any release of destructive factors and consequent severe losses among the civilian population. Recent decree of Russian President on the illegal transfer of the Zaporizhzhia NPP to the ownership of the Russian Federation and the establishment of a government enterprise to manage the ZNPP grossly violate international law and are in contradiction to the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement between Ukraine and IAEA.
Japan condemns Russia's threats to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine as a serious and unacceptable menace to the peace and security of the international community. Japan is gravely concerned about the situation of nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Russia's military activities in and around nuclear power plants and other facilities in Ukraine cannot be tolerated. Japan commends the continuous efforts of the IAEA to secure nuclear safety and security in Ukraine based on the 7 indispensable pillars of nuclear safety and security.
The U.S. withdrawal from the JCPOA in 2018 and the imposition of sanctions, as well as the current U.S. administration's refusal to return to it, have caused immense damage to international efforts toward nuclear non-proliferation. However, Iran has continuously upheld its commitment to the Comprehensive Safeguard Agreement and has been cooperative with the IAEA. Iran is prepared to fully carry out its commitment under JCPOA, pending the compliance of another JCPOA participants. The Agency and the Islamic Republic of Iran has close working relationship in a variety of areas. Iran has the best history of receiving IAEA inspections.
In another development, tens of thousands of British nurses will go on strike for the first time over demands for better pay. That's according to the trade union, adding to pressure on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak during an economic crisis. Nurses at the majority of state-run National Health Service hospitals across Britain have voted to strike. The Royal College of Nursing said in action that threatens major disruption in an already strained health system. The ASEAN, which has more than 300,000 members, said industrial action will begin before the end of the year, following the first ever strike vote in its 106-year-old history. A British man has been killed while fighting in Ukraine. Simon Lingard from Great Harwood, Lancashire, died when his unit was attacked on Monday. His family described him as the bravest man and a true hero who went to Ukraine to stand up for what he believed was right. A Foreign Office spokesperson said it was supporting the family of a British national who had lost his life in Ukraine. Paying tribute on social media, Mr. Lingard's 17-year-old son, Jackson, says, quote, "I can't put into words how much he is and will be missed, but I'm comforted to know that this happened doing what he loved and surrounded by friends." Stacey Longworth, the mother of Mr. Lingard's two children, says he had been a soldier for most of his life and was a former member of the Parachute Regiment. And a rising number of households are having their energy smart meters remotely switched to prepayment plans. That's according to the energy regulator, Ofgem. Suppliers can use the technology to swap customers onto a payment method that is often more expensive without their permission. It can leave customers who need to top up at risk of running out of energy. Ofgem says some had been left without power for days or even weeks, and a trade body says mistakes were made. Let's now talk to Dr. Tony Agbons, who's a researcher and senior lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University, joins us from London. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning, Kayode. How are you doing this morning?
Well, I'm doing well, but clearly not so for those still in the theater of war. And I'd just like to begin from something that perhaps hits close to home for you. A British soldier killed in fighting in the Ukraine-Russia war. And I wonder, when stories like that hit the United Kingdom, how is it received? Especially because I know that there might be mixed feelings amongst the populace. Some who think, well, we should be fully involved. Some others who think, well, let's think UK first. So just how is this being received?
Yeah, it's very sad news and very painful. And I want to join commiserate with the family of the departed. Not just him, others who have lost their lives, Ukrainians, helping fight from Russia, even though they are also casualty from the Russian side. This is a needless and senseless war anyway. So it's very painful, and this is very sad for humanity that this war, like you said just now, this war is going to the 9th month, and it doesn't seem to be ending at all. It is really, really sad.
Perhaps we can also speak to what's happening on ground mainly now, because we've seen some withdrawal, which has been described as a major one in this 9-month long war. I mean, too long for a lot of people. And I wonder, seeing that withdrawal, for you, does not signify maybe some silver lining, maybe the beginning of the end of the war? I know this has been asked several times, but this looks like it's a bit significant. So does that look like the beginning of the end for you with this latest withdrawal by Russian forces?
In fact, when the news filtered in that the Russian commander, the general, has asked his, forces to withdraw from Kherson yesterday, when the news filtered in, I would say that many of us, we looked at it as a bit tricky. The winter season is very, very much on hand at the moment. And this withdrawal is something that the Ukrainian military has to be really careful about. Is it that the Russians are planning an ambush? Are they planning, attack? It's very, very, it's something that nobody can really place a hand on why this withdrawal has come in. But analysts have also said that the withdrawal is as a result of the huge losses that the Russian military have suffered in Kherson and other regions in the south, in Ukraine. So probably, yeah, also be that they re-strategize and attack Ukraine. Watching and looking and see what happens next.
To you, because we keep having fluctuations in that audio. It's not letting us get full value of the conversation and all of the knowledge you have on this one. So we'll need to wrap this up for now, but clearly we'll continue the conversation with you. I really apologize. I want us to get full value for the conversation as always. But I'd like to thank you so much. We've been speaking with Dr. Tony Egmont, who's researcher and senior lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University, London. We'll definitely be speaking to him soon enough. Well, let's bring you this one. Cambodia's leader met Ukraine's foreign minister in Phnom Penh, with Prime Minister Hun Sen saying his country opposes aggression days ahead of a regional summit that Russia's foreign minister is due to attend. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba also signed a treaty of amity and cooperation with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations on Thursday, as Kyiv seeks to strengthen ties with the bloc, with joint international condemnation of Russia's invasion. In a statement on his social media page, Hun Sen said Cambodia opposes aggression, threats, or the use of violence against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of independent states. Cambodia is hosting the Asian Leaders Summit and also the East Asia Summit over the next few days in Phnom Penh, with some meetings due to include Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, as well as being attended by US President Joe Biden. Now, Cambodia has been more outspoken than most of the members of a 10-member Asian bloc over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Well, British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace says Britain is stepping up its support for Ukrainian soldiers through the winter. On the same day, Russia announced the withdrawal of its troops from the west bank of the Dnieper River near Kherson. Wallace joined NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg to observe the training of Ukrainian troops in the southeast English town of Lead, as Britain announced the delivery of a further 12,000 extreme cold weather sleeping kits for Ukraine.
Well, first of all, Ukraine is still making gains in the east of the country and slowly but surely closing in on Kherson in the south. That's a tough fight. The Russians are clearly determined to cross the river, the Dnieper River, and get across that river and withdraw from the town in good order. And of course, Ukraine doesn't want them to do that and wants to make sure that it is not an easy exit for Russia. But of course, winter's approaching, and that is an important challenge for both sides. So we're determined, like what you're seeing here, to give Ukrainian soldiers the best basic skills, because we already know that the Russian military aren't doing that. Some of these mobilized troops are literally getting 48 hours, a helmet, a rusty gun sent to the front, and very many of them are dying very quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few weeks we'll see them successfully get to that side of the river. We've just got to be there to make sure that be there for them in supporting them with equipment, training, weapon systems that allow them to do that.
What we have seen is that the Ukrainian soldiers are able to push back, retake territory, and that President Putin and Moscow totally underestimated the strength of the Ukrainian armed forces. They also underestimated the the willingness, the unity of NATO allies and partners throughout the world to support Ukraine. The bravery, the courage of the Ukrainian forces is, of course, the main reason why we have seen the Ukrainians being able to push back, but also the support they get, the equipment, but also the training that, for instance, the United Kingdom and other allies provide is essential, and we just need to do more of that.
Well, also, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg praised the UK for the country's strong support for both the military alliance and Ukraine following a meeting with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at 10 Downing Street. Stoltenberg is the first international leader to visit Sunak in Downing Street, and the meeting comes as Britain looks to update its integrated review of defence priorities as government mulls spending cuts. Earlier, Stoltenberg and British Defence Minister Ben Wallace observed the training of Ukrainian troops in the southeast English town of Leeds, as you saw earlier, as Britain announced the delivery of a further 12,000 extreme cold weather sleeping kits for Ukraine.
I just finished a very good and productive meeting with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and I praised him and the United Kingdom for the strong support to our transatlantic alliance, to NATO. In a dangerous world, it's even more important that North America and Europe stand together. I also praised the Prime Minister for the strong support the United Kingdom provides to Ukraine. This morning I visited one of the training sites for Ukrainian soldiers. I saw here in the United Kingdom, and I saw the brave young Ukrainian soldiers being trained by British trainers, but also trainers from Canada, from Lithuania, from other NATO allied countries, proving how the United Kingdom plays a key role in leading our efforts in providing support to Ukraine.
Well, after the break, it's a search for deeper ties as Russian security official pushes for deeper ties with Iran amid Ukraine war. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Ukrainian soldiers showed off a homemade anti-aircraft weapon which they claim has a high rate of success in shooting down Russian drones. Well, created in Mykolaiv, the weapon consists of coupled machine guns mounted on a modified vehicle and was designed by Ukraine's National Guard servicemen in cooperation with civilian technicians. According to Dmytro Pletinchuk, press officer of Mykolaiv Regional Military Administration, Ukraine manages to down about 80% of Russian drones. Iran acknowledged for the first time on Saturday that it had supplied Russia with drones, but said they were sent a few months before Moscow's forces invaded Ukraine. In recent weeks, Ukraine has reported a surge in drone attacks on civilian infrastructure, notably targeting power stations and dams using Iranian-made drones. And emergency workers dismantled a huge Soviet monument near the Ukrainian-Slovak border yesterday. Local authorities had inspected the monument erected to mark the Soviet victory over the Nazis in World War II and declared it to be in critical condition. On the site of the dismantled Soviet monument, the regional governor said he planned to erect a monument or memorial in honor of the Trans-Carpathian Mountain Stormtroopers on the 120th Mountain Assault Brigade, which is currently fighting in South Ukraine against Russian troops. In April, Ukrainian authorities dismantled a huge Soviet-era monument in the center of Kyiv, meant to symbolize friendship between Russia and Ukraine. And top United Nations officials will meet a senior Russian delegation in Geneva tomorrow to discuss extending a Ukraine Black Sea grain export deal and efforts to smooth shipments of Russian food and fertilizers to global markets. The deal, allowing the export of food and fertilizers from several of Ukraine's Black Sea ports, brokered by the United Nations and Turkey on July the 22nd, could expire on November the 19th. That's if Russia or Ukraine object to its extension. Well, a key part of the July package deal is also facilitating exports of Russian grain and fertilizer exports. The United Nations has said that Russian grain exports have increased, but that work needed to be done to alleviate a chilling effect of Western sanctions on Russian fertilizer exports.
To urge parties to continue exerting full and good faith in the implementation of the initiative and to facilitate the timely, safe, and unimpeded movement of vessels. As we mentioned before, this is a critical supply line and it needs to continue delivering more and much needed food to the world. There is something else that I can also tell you, is that the Secretary General of the UN Conference on Trade and Development, Rebecca Greenspan, and the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths. They will be meeting with a high-level delegation from the Russian delegation on November 11th in Geneva, so that is in 2 days, Friday. They will continue ongoing consultations in support of the efforts by the Secretary General, our own Secretary General, on the full implementation of the two agreements signed in Istanbul on July 22nd. So this is a new development on the negotiations.
And the European Union will struggle to fill its gas storage tanks next summer. The head of its executive warned as she announced measures to boost renewable energy supply, but stopped short of backing a price cap that has split opinion across the region. Addressing the European Parliament, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced plans to accelerate the granting of permits for renewable power projects. She adds that the EU will have added 50 gigawatts of renewable power this year and could do more in 2023.
By the end of the year, we will have achieved the largest growth in renewables in the history of the European Union. This is almost a further 50 gigawatt that we will have additionally as renewables in the market, which is double what we had added last year.
So let's switch to some business angle to all of this. I mean, let's get a sense of how this is impacted businesses from the micro to macro. And as always, we're joined on the program this morning by Laddie Williams to give us insight to the business angle. Good morning, Laddie.
Morning.
So let's start from this Russia tax cuts, especially for long-term digital asset holders.
Yep.
I know that this is your field, really.
Yeah.
But to what end is this latest tax cuts? Because I know there's a for and against. Don't use too much, but also allow people to get access to it. So what is this meant to achieve?
So basically, at the end of the day, you know, the sanctions have made, you know, Russia have to look for other options, you know, when it comes to, you know, global trade. You know, they've been sanctioned on all sides, you know, for the financial, you know, markets. But coming down to cryptocurrency now, you know, cryptocurrency is decentralized. So that decentralized nature, you know, makes it hard for you to know who the investor is.
It's hard to trace.
Yeah, it's hard to trace, even though it's a public ledger. Yeah. Knowing the people behind the wallets is a problem. So now they're trying to, you know, regulate the industry, see how they can get, you know, citizens to use these currencies and still balancing their financial system. Because if the financial system gets overrun, you know, by cryptocurrencies,
they need a plan B.
They need a plan B. It's a problem because they lose control. You know, the decentralized nature of cryptocurrency makes it easy to just send, you know, money outside the country, right, and nobody knows, you know, how much you send. You could send $1 million for a cost of about $1. You know, so it's attractive. People also trade it, you know, for investment purposes. So a lot of people make money trading cryptocurrency. So at the end of the day, they're trying to give long-term holders that tax incentive, right, because when you're a day trader, you know, you're taxed on your profits.
On the go.
On the go. But they're trying to make, you know, the traders not trade actively, more like hold these assets long-term, and you can use them for your transactions, but it cannot overrun the financial system. That's why the central bank there is, you know, looking for ways to just balance it. The citizens can use it, but not too much. You know, but they want to be able to use it, you know, for their international, you know, transactions.
So they have to find that delicate balance.
There's a delicate balance there.
Dear. And now talk to us about this, you know, this deal between Kyrgyzstan and Russia exceeding $2 billion.
Oh, yeah.
I know we've always pointed to the fact that, I mean, this might just be business as usual for some people. I mean, lives are at stake here. People dying on a daily basis. We see the effect on infrastructure and all of that. but there's still the business angle, and it seems to be, will I say thriving? $2 billion,
yeah,
quite a lot.
It's thriving, and at the end of the day, this data is showing us, how friendly, the friendly nations are to Russia at this time. Because we've seen, trade data between Russia and India, that's up. Trade data between Russia and China also up. Before the war, it wasn't this high. But Kyrgyzstan is also, one of their trading partners and also a friendly nation that they transact with, globally. But now we've seen that the trade is up about 42%. 42% in 8 months. So they're trading a lot.
So it's clearly
this time.
sort of tied to the war. The war
exactly, because with the war on, we see the unfriendly nations. They are a lot. The unfriendly nations, and they've cut out Russia from trade. Other items that and technology that Russia needs at this time. So they have to look. Russia have to look to other options, and Kyrgyzstan is one of them. They get exports like fish, edible vegetables, man-made filaments, and all of that. So at the end of the day, this data is just showing us the reality of what's happening. They have been sanctioned, but they are looking at other options, and they're looking at building. Yes, they're looking at building even the ones they have now. They say how they can take it further, to make sure that they get the benefits, of this trade.
There was a major withdrawal yesterday, and that's like the major headline, trying to understand how this will affect the war. Maybe this might be the beginning of the end of the war. And of course, I imagine it will have effect on the markets as well.
Oh, yes.
I just imagine. So how are the markets looking?
So currently, let's start with Europe. Right. Europe, I checked it this morning. It's all in the red. Oof. At the end of the day, but the crypto market, that's where the real bloodbath is, at this time. But checking Europe, I see they're looking out for the U.S., CPI data. That's out later today. Right. And investors also in the U.S. looking out for that data. So we're seeing them, pull back. I saw the U.S. futures slightly, in the red this morning, but and the NGX bringing it down here, closed positive yesterday, about 0.04%, even though the downtrend continues. But we do always see, that rally, bearish rally, we call it, and it's short-lived most of the time because it's still on a downtrend. But the crypto market, we see it, the bloodshed continues, in that market. Bitcoin now trading about $16,000 this morning. Started the week, above 20K, but it's still the FTX, Binance, contagion there impacting, that market. That issue is still escalating, and we're seeing, retail react to that, and they're selling off at this time.
I don't know, with the losses we're seeing, I don't know if there's some sort of psychosocial support for people who are trading crypto right now.
They do. They do need support.
Oh, my heart goes out to those trading
and investors out there. Really.
But Ladi, we'll see you in the coming minutes to get more insight, of course, the world of business and digital currencies. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, let's now switch briefly to North Korea. That's right, where the country launched a short-range ballistic missile towards waters of its east coast just yesterday. Now, according to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the missile was fired at 3:31 p.m. local time from the Sukchon area of South Pyongyang province. Well, he adds that the South Korean military has strengthened its surveillance and is closely cooperating with the United States. Well, Japan's defense minister, Yasukazu Hamada, says the missile flew about 250 kilometers at a very low altitude of about 50 kilometers or even less and landed in the East Sea, also known as the Sea of Japan. He adds that the authorities are still examining further details like the missile's orbit and condemned the launch as threatening the peace and security of its country, region, and international community at large. Well, a senior Russian security official met Iranian leaders in Tehran yesterday as the two countries pledged closer ties in the face of Western pressure over Russia's war in Ukraine. Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev's visit took place following accusations by Ukraine and the West that Russia has used Iranian Shahid 136 drones to target Ukraine's energy infrastructure in a series of attacks over recent weeks. Russia's state media says Patrushev and Iran's top security official Ali Shimkani discussed the situation in Ukraine and measures to combat what they called Western interference in their internal affairs. Shimkani also called for deeper ties with Russia in the energy, transportation, agriculture, trade and banking sectors. Well, let's talk now to Roy Okidie, who is a fellow International Institute of Professional Security, fellow Institute of Security of Nigeria. He joins us virtually from the nation's capital, Abuja. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure.
Well, quite a number of issues to really touch on, but I'd like to get your own thoughts on that latest withdrawal, that pullout that we've seen, and it's been described as very significant. Some think maybe this is just part of the game plan, keep the enemy guessing, not knowing what to expect next. Some think it's as a result of the onslaught from Ukraine and allied forces. I wonder what your thought of this latest withdrawal is.
Well, I like to, thank you for the opportunity. I like to look at certain situations from the angle of military strategy. And before me, I've spoken on this particular expected withdrawals that will also come on, because when the rear is getting weakened, definitely you need to withdraw and strengthen the rear, because every cross into new grounds, every plan to take up new cities must be from the strength of your rear. So definitely this shows that the rear in Russia is weakening from supplies, is weakening from personnel. Don't forget also that so many Russian soldiers are decamping. They are pulling their uniforms. They are running away from the battlefront. And you know that supplies are becoming a challenge, because if you have just Iran and any other country that gives you the kind of support that you need, definitely you'll be trading with more than expected allowances that will not do Russian economy much good.
Right. So essentially, you are not really, do I say, hopeful that this is maybe the beginning of an end. Am I correct?
Well, we have discussed also about the relevance of interrogating the purpose of a war and a battle. Now, the war per se is beyond putting boots on ground, beyond having soldiers on ground. So if you want to really calculate an advantage towards the end of the war, you must look at other intricacies. And one of them is the renewal of the grain source. The other one is the fertilizers of the Russian export. So many economic values will go into how you can negotiate procuring arms, procuring military intelligence, buying intelligence from moles that Russia or Ukraine must have on either side. So I think that this withdrawal, as the Ukrainian president has said, might be to consolidate on their gains and see what next to do. So he shouldn't be carried away emotionally. All parties must be on deck, and the withdrawal to me looks like a consolidation on their weakening rear, and it's a focus on the end.
Right. So talk to us, really, because from the perspective of the U.S. government, the U.S. president specifically now, he believes that this latest withdrawal would allow both sides to sort of recalibrate, and recalibrate can mean different things. You are looking at it from the, strategic warfare angle, but in terms of negotiations as well, because I imagine that this period is quite vital. It's just on the verge of winter, and maybe it's related, maybe not. But what should be happening right now? Aside the warfare angle, perhaps a window. What do you think should be happening? Because winter is upon us, and I imagine that the situation will be more dire during winter than we've seen this past 9 months.
Yeah, so from my own perspective, I think that the negotiations with support countries needs to be geared up from the side of Russia, because China, we all know China, they come in for their economic considerations. You know, they don't have any country that they love attack. So if they are banking on China, supporting them with military support and technology, then they need to give so much which may affect them. But if you are looking at Iran, Iran likes to do a lot of show of force. And I've told a lot of people, Iran does not have the capacity that it is telling the world that it has. In this last exercise, they just tested their missiles. You can see clearly that the carcass of the missile has been moved out of the sea and it is being inspected. And I tell you that the inspection will give enough information to create a deterrent for whatever that kind of missile can do. So when you see Iran doing that, it's to increase its negotiations with Russia. And what Russia is giving because of this war, I'm afraid it may decapacitate it towards all its frontals. It will negotiate it on the world portal.
I mean, help us understand the thinking of perhaps both leaders at this time, because they've been in the thick of things for 9 months. And I imagine maybe this presents an opportunity, as the US president said, to recalibrate, to step away and, see things, do some sort of appraisal. So what do you think will be topmost on the minds of the leaders now? We can talk about the allied nations, they're secondary, but primarily those leaders right now with this withdrawal, what do you think will be paramount in their minds? If you could give us some sort of insight based on your experience.
Well, right now, it's not looking good for Russia, because most of their allies does not have enough favoritism worldwide. And currently, there is a global event coming up. And Russia is already showing the body language that it's not attending. And if you had attended, you would have been able to have the opportunity to put forward logical arguments for your position. So I think Putin should review his decision and send delegates to attend that global leaders event coming up, or attend himself, and for Ukraine, they are getting a lot of followership, they are getting a lot of compensation and support. So for me, I think that Russian leaders beyond the president would have been having a lot of discussions. And I think the president should listen to them, wear into this opportunity to begin to negotiate for a soft landing. Now, where we are in this context now is that there won't be signs near or in future of military glory, because it will just be a withdrawal and a taking over, a withdrawal and a taking over. But I will advise that a lot of compensation can be gained, especially as the U.S. midterm election just went through, and we have seen that the incumbent government is having a lot of control. So both presidents should begin to look at discussion, and that discussion will help them wade into the opportunity and the open windows available right now.
Mr. Roy Okidivie, who's a fellow International Institute of Professional Security, also fellow Institute of Security of Nigeria, thank you so much for your intervention this morning.
It's a pleasure.
We'll take a moment. When we return, EU explains catch to $18 billion in Ukraine aid. Details in a moment. Please stay with us.
Like drops of rain, individuals and groups innovate, birthing ideas that might make the difference in the conversations and action to fight climate change and the negative impact of man's activities. Innovative thinking from Africa and Europe to save our planet, to light up our cities without tearing apart the ozone, making progress safe and sustainable. On Eco Africa, we highlight the efforts to live and grow sustainably at these times on Channels Television.
From the north to the south, east and west, Network Africa brings you news stories from all around the continent. With wide range in coverage, insights and analysis of special issues, we dissect Africa in its beauty and peculiarities. Network Africa tells the African story from the African perspective. Network Africa, weekdays at 4 p.m.
Well, Pope Francis has condemned the use of mercenaries in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, saying they were inflicting so much cruelty on the population. Well, the pontiff says, quote, "I renew my call for prayers for the martyred Ukraine. Let us ask the Lord for peace for these people who are so troubled and who suffer so much cruelty by the mercenaries who are making war." Earlier, the European Union imposed sanctions on the Wagner Group, a Russian private military company it has accused of clandestine operations on the Kremlin's behalf in Ukraine. But President Vladimir Putin has said the group does not represent the Russian state, but that it is a private military. In the meantime, Russian Orthodox Church Patriarch Kirill held a funeral mass for Archpriest Mikhail Vasiliev, who died in Ukraine. Vasiliev is reported to have died on November the 6th in clashes between the Russian and Ukrainian forces in what Moscow calls its special military operation. Russian President Vladimir Putin awarded Vasiliev the Hero of Russia title posthumously. Vasiliev is said to have died during shelling in Ukraine's Kherson region, which is largely occupied by Russia and has been the scene of intense battles between Russia and Ukraine. Well, the European Commission plans to offer Ukraine an $18 billion package of loans to get the country through 2023 on the condition that Kyiv repays the debt over 35 years. According to the Commission, Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis, the package will be doled out in monthly increments of $1.5 billion through 2023, with each installment paid back in 35 years, Dombrovskis says during a press briefing. According to Euractiv news site, the EU will borrow the money from global markets and pay the interest on the loans, he added. Dombrovskis says that Russia, in fact, Ukraine, I should say, was in acute need of assistance due to Russia's missile and drone attacks on its power infrastructure, and called on EU countries and the EU Parliament to approve the package before the end of the year. Well, that's the program for today. Thank you for watching. I'm Kaido. Goodbye.